Today we're going to see how to create safe and secure transactions with Truzo. You will log on to truzo.com. Once logged in to my Truzo profile, I will see a little human icon at the top right hand corner, and I will click on the human icon, and to create the transaction I will click on new transaction. Here I get to pick my role as well as the goods or services that I'm buying, and this will be assisted by creating a sentence for you. For example, I am buying goods. A goods tab will pop up where on the line item I will then describe the goods that I'm buying. Today we'll be buying chairs. On the quantity tab, I will state the number of chairs that I'm buying. I'm buying 6 chairs, and then the unit price. On the price tab, I will be selecting the unit price of each chair. And the total item will be the unit price times the number of chairs that I'm buying. And then I will save that if I'm happy with the line item. And when I'm happy with the line item, I will click next to move on to the next transaction. On this here, I will then put in the particulars of the seller. Once I've logged in the particulars of my seller, I can then move on to the next step of the transaction. This is the fees tab where I now get to choose the payment method. As you can see, I have 4 different payment methods that I can use to do a payment for this specific purchase, as well as then choosing who pays for the Truzo.com fees. Here we can split this 50-50, or we can split it however way that the buyer and myself choose to do so. So we can move it with the buyer paying whatever that we choose and myself, so we can play around with that. Today we'll do it at a 50-50 split, and then I click next. A complete tab will then show up where this shows me the summary of the transaction. Once I'm happy with that, I will then click on the inspection days. This allows me to inspect the products that I've bought from my seller. Once I'm happy with that, I will then instruct Truzo.com to then release the funds to the seller. Once happy with the inspection days, I will accept the Truzo.com T's and C's, as well as agreeing to all the particulars of the transaction, and create the transaction. Once a transaction has been created, I will then be taken to a screen where it shows me the summary on the left hand side as well as the timeline on the right hand side. The summary on the left hand side will show you all the transaction particulars as well as who created the transaction and what role that person who created the transaction is playing. On the timeline, this will show me how far the transaction is in terms of the transaction being approved, funded, or even delivered. So this will always guide me as to how far the transaction is. And because I'm the buyer now, I will need to fund this transaction, and I will pick one of these 4 payment methods to fund the transaction. Today we will pick Truzo.com. These are all the funds that are in my Truzo wallet. Next, on funding the transaction, on the payment details, I get to see the transaction number, which is a reference, as well as the transaction totals and transaction fees that I will be paying for on the Truzo.com. I'll click next on that. It shows the balance that I have on my wallet, and because of the balance that I have, it then allows me to pay for the specific transaction. I will click on complete, and then this will then allocate the funds from my Truzo wallet to the specific transaction. As you can see on my timeline, the transaction has been funded, and the reason why approved is not highlighted is because my counterpart needs to accept the transaction or approve the transaction on their side. The next tab here shows us the participants of the specific transaction. As you can see, mine is there next to the buyer and the seller's details as well. When the seller has logged into the Truzo platform and updated his profile, this will change from his phone number, email address to his specific name and surname. The next tab will be the merchandise. This will show me exactly the merchandise that I'm buying in this specific transaction, which will show the description here, which is chairs, the quantity, which is 6 chairs, and then the unit price of each chair, totaling to the value of 9,000 Rand. The next is the financials, which will show me the transaction total. This is what I will be paying as the buyer, including the fees of the transaction. So these are the fees which are now due to Truzo for us securing our funds or securing the transaction on Truzo. And this is what is going to be dispersed to the seller once the transaction has been completed and the buyer, myself, is happy with the chairs that I've received from the seller. So a total receivable will be the transaction total less the transaction fees of Truzo. And then here you'll see the total fees of Truzo.com.
Truzo by Envision It, creating trust between strangers.